When I talk about the US healthcare system and we say it's broken, it isn't, right? We are phenomenal at picking up things, and we are phenomenal at then like, all right, I'm going to give you a medication to try to fix this. But where we leave the mark is all these tools that we have that we could implement sooner, that we can talk to our patients differently, so that we change the metric of like, hey, I don't want you to stay home. I don't want you to be on medications. I don't want you to smoke marijuana and then chill on Netflix, right? I want you to get back so you're more, you're performing at a higher level, you're performing at your full potential. I don't want to go to a primary care doctor because he's just going to tell me I need to wait 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, when I could just come to your emergency department and get it done. So I think we have the tools. It's just, do we have the system that we efficiently do these?
Okay, well, we're live. Welcome to this week's Lifts podcast. I'm Matthew Januszek, and I'm here with my co-host Mohammed, Iqbal, somewhere in the world today. Mo, welcome. And where are you sitting today?
Well, today I'm sitting in a conference room in Dallas, Texas. But before this, John told me that I had impeccable lighting and I look good. So that could be two things. It's the fluorescent lights above me, because I've got the studio lighting at home, right? We've got the podcast thing set up. Or it could be, if you remember, Matthew, when we were in Florida, I picked up these peptides. It's this facial lotion peptide and NAD cream that I've been putting on my face every night. So it's one of the two.
Ah, okay, the NAD cream thing. Yeah, I've been trying it myself. How does it look? Am I looking a bit younger?
It's working. This is what we resort ourselves to.
Okay. Well, we've got an exciting guest today, and who I understood just off camera is one of our first customers in the US. So I'm excited to delve into a bit more detail on that one as well.
Yeah, that was interesting. I actually did not know that. So we're joined today by Dr. Nestor Rodriguez, who I've spoken to a few times. He's a co-founder of Carbon World Health. We've been talking a lot about preventative, longevity, the intersection of fitness, wellness, and healthcare. And I'm excited for this episode because Dr. Rodriguez, I'm just going to call him Nestor because that's what I've called him, has a unique perspective because he comes from emergency medicine, which is one of the most reactive parts of healthcare. But his work today is focused on something very different, which is proactive health, performance, recovery, and longevity. And Canada, he's been doing it before you've had a lot of the kind of in vogue companies today for a really long time. And that shift today is what today's conversation is about. For a long time, healthcare was built around treating people once something went wrong. But consumers today are starting to think very differently. They're tracking their sleep, they're tracking their recovery and HRV, their hormones, glucose levels, and a whole bunch of other markers. They're using wearables, they're getting blood work, they're exploring or trying GLP-1s or GLP-3s. And they're not just asking, am I sick? But the question that they're asking is, how do I perform better? How do I live healthier? And how do I live longer? And the timing matters. Today, the World Health Organization recently issued its first global guidance, well, not today, but rather recently, on the use of GLP-1 therapies for obesity, framing obesity as a chronic relapsing disease affecting more than 1 billion people globally. Morgan Stanley now projects that the global GLP-1 market could reach 190 billion by 2035, which is more than double the levels we saw in 2025. So today I want to unpack the shift that we're in right now. Are we moving from sick care to performance medicine? What are people getting right? What are people getting wrong about this whole industry? And ultimately, how do we turn all the data that we're collecting into better decisions, better outcomes, and better habits? Nestor, I'm really excited to have you on Lifts.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming, so I'm pumped and I'm ready for this conversation. A very important conversation, like you mentioned. And for us, being in this for over 15 years before wellness was the thing that it is now, right? When I left academic medicine, people thought I was crazy. They're like, wait, you're helping run a residency program. My next thing was like, now I take over the program, then I become chair, right? Academic. Coming from that perspective to where I am now, it's just been a 180 in terms of how I talk to physicians and then how I talk to my consumers, which we call them clients at Carbon.
Well, look, I thought a good place to start off is Mo's comments where he talks about, are we moving from sick care to health care? And it was quite timely. I had a colleague, he had he got a flu or COVID recently, and he found out that he had shingles, and it brought on this condition that made it quite difficult for him to walk for a while. So went to see a number of different specialists, and he was telling me the story about how he was contacted shortly after he was diagnosed. And the first thing they offered him was to say, look, one of the things that will definitely help is we could give you a prescription, and we could give you some THC type of product, essentially medical marijuana, which they said would certainly help your condition, and they recommended that he tried that. And then the second thing they said is, hey, by the way, do you realize that you could, because of this condition that you've got, you could sign on for disability, you could get up to something like $4,000 a month, we can sign you up immediately. And so the conclusion of the conversation was there was two things. One, they were almost saying, hey, you can stay at home and we'll get you prescription for medical cannabis. So you can just stay at home, chill out, watch Netflix, and you'll be fine. And then secondly, you probably don't need to go back to work because we can get you this disability allowance where we'll actually pay you to stay at home watching Netflix and getting high. And although he's not the type of person that would do that, it seems as though there is still a system that encourages certain types of people probably not to want to get better. And so my question to you, like you've spent a lot of your career in emergency high stakes medicine and the healthcare system. And I was just curious, what did working at that end of the spectrum teach you about the system and where you think it fundamentally breaks down?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So in two parts, I would say. One, in that we are capable, right? When I talk about the US healthcare system and we say it's broken, it isn't, right? We are phenomenal at picking up things, and we are phenomenal at then like, all right, I'm going to give you a medication to try to fix this. But where we leave the mark is all these tools that we have that we could implement sooner, that we can talk to our patients differently so that we change the metric of like, hey, I don't want you to stay home. I don't want you to be on medications. I don't want you to smoke marijuana and then chill on Netflix, right? I want you to get back so you're more, you're performing at a higher level, you're performing at your full potential. And what I mean by that is in the US, everyone turns to the emergency department, and COVID proved this even more so, right? Because now the way our system's set up, if you come to the emergency department, and colleagues are going to hate me for saying this, is we have to do a full workup. Whether you came into me for abdominal pain for months or like acute. Why? Because of the way the system's set up, and we have access. So people, I don't blame them when sometimes they come in, they're like, I don't want to go to urgent care because they're slow and they're not going to do anything. I don't want to go to a primary care doctor because he's just going to tell me I need to wait 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, when I could just come to your emergency department and get it done. So I think we have the tools. It's just, do we have the system that we efficiently do these? The other example I like to give with that is executive programs, right? When I speak nationally, I have people raise your hand, and tons of them do it. And that's an executive program is essentially you have the money and the title to pay to see me one day, and I do all this workup. And I view you as like, you two are the best people I got to keep alive and performing well. But if you saw me the next day and you guys just came as individuals that didn't come through this program, I'm going to say you're good enough. You don't need these testings. You don't need that stuff. So the system we have in terms of the equipment, the tools, the diagnostics, I think we're doing well. We're phenomenal, right? And I put us against anyone in the world. The way we integrate it is where we're failing, right? And then the question becomes, is it the physicians or is it the system, meaning the insurance companies, right? That's the debate that we have. And I'll say, I'll throw ourselves in that mix, in that physicians, we're part of the problem because we've left the seat at the table, right? We're not there. We're not advocating like we used to. Now business professionals are running hospitals, right? The insurance company, you have a system where people that don't understand medicine are running it. So how are they going to run it? Like a business, right? Like financial.
Well, let's unpack that a bit more, Nestor, because I agree with you. And I think physicians, unfortunately, sometimes get a lot of the blame behind it, right? And every physician, most of the physicians that I come across, people like yourself and others and people we've had on this podcast, are actually trying to influence change. And I would even go as far as institutions. I was recently at Stanford at their School of Medicine. They're incorporating wellness and nutrition and longevity and even therapies into their teachings in medical school. The broader population thinks that medical school is so far behind. And I would push back and say, go to medical schools. I live close to Johns Hopkins. I went to UC Irvine med school. No, they're actually leading the charge. They're not the problem, because they are invested in outcome focused care. I think the problem, at least how I see it, partially because I'm in the middle of it in DC, is incentives. I think the incentives in our system are misaligned. You brought up a good point around you've got business people running hospitals, and now to further to say entire healthcare systems now, because it's very rare that you find one or two hospitals. It's mostly the PE firms have come in and bought all the smaller practices and made them a part of a larger healthcare system. They, in a lot of ways, have created a monopoly in local markets, so you have nowhere else to go. Then I would add it is insurance companies who, as both Matthew and I and yourself, we all are entrepreneurs, run our own businesses or part of our businesses and invest in others. Health insurance costs keep on going up, and you keep on getting less and less. And more frequently, you've got to hire advocates just to get the maximum value from your insurance, which is just crazy when I think about it. And then thirdly, it's the cost of actually delivering or the medications. I think the incentives, everything that I just talked about is incentivized around profit. It's incentivized around people being sick and then the treatment of people being sick. But none of it is really around focus on prevention, because if you have a healthy population, all of the institutions that I've mentioned up the supply chain or the value chain does not get their piece. How do you influence change when you've got an entire machine and system that is wrongly, that is incentivized for unhealthy people?
Yeah, and that's the interesting part, right? For me, and in my, let's say from a political world, right, I have been president of the medical societies, and for me, it's getting physicians to once again not say, I can't against this system, right? Because I think I always tell people as a doctor, 10, 15 years ago, you guys would have looked at me differently and said, man, he's a doctor. Now I say I'm a doctor, you guys are like, all right, cool. Okay, what else did you do? Right? Like we've lost that. And we've also lost that opportunity of when we sit at the table with Congress, with politicians, that it's for all of us, not just for my particular niche of medicine, but like in medicine in general. The other thing that has happened in terms of changing is people are willing to pay out of pocket now, right? Because they're saying, if I'd rather pay you and you give me the value I need, then go to a healthcare system. I'm just going to use them for emergency purposes. So for me, I'm always going to have a job because, everyone, it's catastrophes, but all these other specialties, it's now we have to look at how do we as physicians, and I agree that the new generation is changing it, but there's a lot of physicians out there that still agree with the old school way of thinking of like, if you're not broken, I'm not going to fix you. And that's where you have to then start changing the mentality as a doc. And we have to start then going to these insurance companies and showing them that they are going to be more profitable, because if people are healthy, there's less claims, right? People are working more. There's so many, and studies have shown downstream effects of a healthier population in your world than a sicker population. Though they can't see that because they're just seeing that immediate need of, yeah, but I need this money here. But long term, like studies have shown time and time again, it's everyone wins.
You've been in medicine, and you've also got, I guess, a separate business carbon world, and where I guess you're looking at people from sort of two sides of the spectrum. And also, if you look at a lot of the recent developments in technologies and wearables, which we're going to talk about shortly, what do you see coming through the doors of your practice? Because when I talk to a lot of people that are in business, they're probably slightly different to the average person on the street, but they're leading companies. They have access to some of the best health and resources that are out there. Yet so many people that I come into contact with outside of Mo as the exception, but most of them on paper still feel exhausted, overweight, stressed, and under recovered. So is this still, are we actually getting more unhealthy despite all of the developments in medicine and technology, or are you actually seeing a breakthrough and some light at the end of the tunnel where we are beginning to make a change in a more positive direction?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So at Carbon, I would say I'm seeing positive, but it comes from the mentality, the mindset that we're changing. So we're telling people, so for example, let's say both of you guys did the executive program, and a lot of people do it, and you're serious about those 3 days, but then you go back to your life, right? So those executive programs are great diagnostic tools, but if you're not then implementing it on your day-to-day life, then who cares, right? And in our healthcare system, that's the same thing. If you see your primary care doctor once a year, that's not going to change it. Unless I scared you, you're not changing your habits. You might for a day, you might for two, but not. So the system we have here is every month they have to meet with us, right? And so from a business, you're like, how do you scale? How do you, you're capable of doing it. You're capable of still making money and making people healthy, but it's that mindset that I tell people, are you applying the same strategies that you are to your career, to your health? Otherwise, you're wasting this access without doing anything. And that's what we're seeing with some of the consumables, in my opinion, or some of these like major online companies. Great from a business, right? If we're talking business, phenomenal ideas. But from a changing the needle, I think information, they're at our fingertips, right? But we don't need more information. We need is how do we implement it to me, right? We're on a podcast here. People will learn, but the next question should be like, man, now what do I do with this information, and how do I do it? Because the data is there. So let's say I sent you guys 10-page report on everything I do here. You're gonna read it. You're gonna be like, holy crap, this is cool. Mo might be like, I get this. I'm gonna implement A, B, C, D. But the average person is gonna be like, okay, cool. And a month later, they haven't changed anything, right? So it's that integration. And that's why when we talked with Mo before, when people are trying to bring these things, what I'm seeing is a fitness gym trying to just bring wellness, but it's an afterthought, and people see it, right? This side doesn't believe this side doesn't do that, and then they never integrate, right? I don't want any names out there, but I can tell you some big box gyms that are doing it, and it's like, well, you might as well call it two different businesses, and you guys aren't even communicating. Or wearables, why do you use it?
I would agree with that, but let's get into something that the population has adopted and has used and is growing quickly, and that's GLP-1s, because this is one of the biggest health and wellness stories of our lifetime. And I think even moving out of GLP-1s, but really to GLP-3s and peptides in general. And this conversation largely started around obesity and weight loss, but it's becoming so much bigger than that. The World Health Organization recently issued its first global guidance on the use of GLP-1s for therapies, obesity, conditionally recommending long-term use for adults with obesity as part of the broader treatment plan, of course, including nutrition and fitness and so on. But it also framed obesity as a chronic disease. So I think this tells us that this is not a fringe case anymore. It's becoming a part of the global healthcare ecosystem. But I still think that the public conversation around GLPs is very narrow. A lot of people talk about GLP-1 as a weight loss drug, but metabolic health in general, as you know, Nestor, is much more than weight, right? And you could really do havoc to your system if you're not addressing the other areas like insulin and muscle mass and inflammation and so on. So do you think now that people are just looking at GLP-1 as the magic shot that we're oversimplifying metabolic health?
This week's episode of the Lifts podcast is brought to you by EGYM. EGYM is building the future of smart fitness. Their connected ecosystem combines intelligent equipment, AI-powered software, and the WellPass corporate wellness platform to help operators grow their business and deliver measurable health outcomes to exercises of all shapes and sizes. From powering gym floors to supporting employee wellness, EGYM is redefining the workout one rep at a time. Learn more at egym.com.
I agree. We are. So the way like that I explain it, because think of like cholesterol, when we had issues about cholesterol back in the day, and cholesterol's bad, right? Sugar, metabolic health is even worse, right? From a disease process, disease state. And once you're in it, it's so much harder to get out of. And so the way I look at GLPs is obviously you have to address diet and obviously you have to address exercise. And this is where sometimes the online platform, I push back on, because yeah, you can get it cheaper, but you're not changing these fundamental things that you have to do. Just because, like, you wouldn't pay me to tell you work out more. You wouldn't pay me to tell you to eat better, right? But you have to implement those things, right? And these GLPs are tools. And the way I explain it to people is you can be on a GLP for type 2 diabetes or for diabetes. You could be on it for weight loss. And you could also be on it from longevity. I'm on a GLP. I'm not your traditional. If you saw me walking around, I am not someone that you're going to think, why are you on a GLP? But family history, being Latino, right? I do want to maintain. I have vanity in it. I want to look good. It helps me control these things. But I also then say, I'm giving you, well, I've never had a medication where I can do it once a week per se, and it's decreasing my risk of all those metabolic diseases, heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes. Now we have into the dementia world, the Parkinson world, right? All these things, we've never had that in medicine. And so when we simply say it is just for one thing, I think we're missing the boat, because these now with rituximab coming out and it has glucagon, I mean, you're burning fat now to use your energy.
Which is wild. Yeah, I actually, one of my neighbors is on that for that very reason. Not that she needs to be on any kind of weight loss medication, but it's because of the energy component. And she said it's been a game changer.
It has. And that's where medicine is back, right? Because insurance isn't going to cover it for that, right? And I recently this week talked to a big insurance company but they're getting it too. What they're trying to do is, I forgot what the name of, it's not HSA, because obviously we know that, but it's a different nation that now they're going to put a lot of money to then allow them to buy their employees to buy GLPs. I was like, that's brilliant. Like because that's what people want, right? Long are the days of wellness programs being like, I'll pay you $100 to go to the gym. No one cares. No one's going to do that, right? They want different, but the GLPs, yeah, when you do them well, and I will tell people the scale I use. So you guys have talked to a lot of GLP people, right? In your podcast, if you ask them, how do they monitor for, or how do you microdose? A lot of people will tell you, well, just titrate. But what does titration mean? Like if I tell you guys that, you guys would be like, maybe I did this, maybe my buddy. The way we do it is the scale 0 to 10. 10 is where you ate, like before you got any of this medication. 0 is you're not going to eat ever again. I want to get you to that 4 to 5. And then I want you to eat with purpose, like an athlete, for fuel, for protein, right? Protein. Then I'm going to combine it with the scale that I'm going to show you that the goal is to burn fat, keep muscle. But think about the hospital, we still use a scale that we use in the kitchen where it's just your weight, right? So we're not implementing these services in there. So my goal is I'm going to make you look good. I'm going to give you your emotional tie, why you want to be on it. But I'm also going to slide in all this health benefit, not just for today, but for the future. So I use it as a tool where it's like, you should be happy to take it. You shouldn't feel guilty about it, right? Like this is a tool. I don't feel guilty that I have a team of business professionals helping me out. Same with a legal team, same with a business coach. Why would I feel guilty if I have that health component too? And that's a mindset that we have to change in people.
I think some of it is down to how different people package it. Like listening to what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And when you answer my previous question, there's a big habit component where you've got to get people into changing their habitual lifestyle patterns and decisions as opposed to a quick fix. But I can't help thinking that the industry always does a good job at selling the sizzle, selling the take this and it will solve all of your problems. And I was there was a LinkedIn post, sorry, not LinkedIn, a post on Instagram about Brian Johnson, who apparently spends up to $2 million a year towards this anti-aging, and he came up with his list of conclusions about what really moved the needle. And the first one was sleep is the most powerful drug in the world. Next one was be in your bed for 8 hours. The third one was same time at bed every night before midnight. And the fourth one was don't eat right before bed. So all of the things that he seems to be saying are kind of really basic stuff. And my guess is when you work with a client, you're going through the whole package and explaining to them all of the other things that they need to implement. But I'm just wondering if that is the message that's being sold. So with that being said, and with the advancement of technology, a lot of these new hormones, peptides, and these clinics that are really mushrooming, like, what would you want consumers to be asking, not necessarily just for your clinic, but anyone that's getting involved in this? What would you want them to ask before they walk into any longevity or performance clinic?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So a couple of things. One, from like, what does the program entail? Because you want same that you ask for as a doctor that you're not getting, you should be getting from these programs. So how am I going to be tracked? How am I going to be evaluated as an individual? And then how am I going to be shown the next version of myself? And so what I mean by that is, there's foundational things that people need to get. So I use cars as an analogy for people. The gas tank and then the car itself. And so every car, I don't care what car we have, needs brakes, tires. I used to say engine, but now, or gas, but now it's electrical, right? So I'll keep it to those two. And it doesn't matter what car. Those are, to me, hormones, right? Am I evaluating hormones in the right way? Am I filling the tank? Then we go into this performance world. And then we go to this executive world. And the difference with performance is the difference of what do we want to invest in? What do we want to be? I want to be a Lamborghini. Therefore, I know it costs, right? And I know it takes a different attitude and mindset to become a Lamborghini. So I'm willing to do X, Y, and Z. And it's okay if you want to be a Camry. It doesn't matter, right? But you got to fix the foundational, and then you have to do this. So for me, is how am I going to track? How am I going to know that, one, you're making me healthier, plus you're giving me that emotional need that I want, right? Because that's the hook. The emotional need is why you came to me. So I would tell you, Matthew, I know you came in because you want to look younger. I'm going to give you the creams, but I'm making you healthier at the same time. Do you want it? You're not going to be like, no, doc, let's keep away the health thing. Just give me the beauty. The other thing that they have to ask, and this is where, when we talk about peptides, and I think there's a confusion out there. Because Robert Kennedy just said, hey, I want some of these peptides unbanned, people are like, oh my God, this is awesome. No, that makes it easier for me, because that means more of the pharmacies I deal with are going to be able to do them again. But it doesn't change the great market that's out there. So you have to ask, where are you sourcing your stuff, right? Who is managing, and how do you know that those pharmacies you're talking about matter? Because nowadays, every day I get a new pharmacy that says, hey, I can give it to you cheaper. Yeah, but cheaper. Like, I don't want cheaper. I want it that it's actually safe for the clients. And think about, how did we get here where I could tell you this is for animals only, take it.
So one of the things that I want to shift gears to as well is talking about wearables, right? So peptides is one where people are going to consume on their own. But think about the growth of wearables. And recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, Fitbit announced the Fitbit Air, which is a $99 wearable. Today, we've got hundreds of millions of people wearing health sensors every single day. Wearables are going to continue to grow with this new Fitbit product, which really does a lot of the insights of what a Whoop offers for $99 and no subscription. I just think you're going to see the growth of wearables explode in the next couple of years. And for many people, a lot of their insights and the first time they've even looked at whether they're getting sick or not is from their wearable telling them something. I know, Matthew, you and I have talked about this, looking at our Oura ring scores or our recovery scores or temperatures. And that's the first sign of illness coming through. Our resting heart rate goes up, our HRV is down, and so on. So I'm curious, Nestor, from your perspective, because we talk about this, that how do gyms participate in the wearable journey? But I'm sure, given your practice, do you have people coming through your front door or using their wearables to help inform directionally where they should go as a next step? How are you changing your practice with now people almost self-diagnosing themselves?
Yeah, so one, I would say, from funny, not funny, but as a doctor, we're sensitive beings. So to my colleagues, we have to recognize that, right? And we have to recognize that people aren't insulting us by saying, I already researched this. I put in ChatGPT. I've done this. And I'm like, okay, great. But you're with me for that assurance, right? To look at the whole picture, because ChatGPT, you could ask it a question, but depending on the knowledge, that question you're going to ask is completely different. So from providers, I have to say, we have to know that this exists, and we have to learn about these things, right? I would guess if you asked an average doctor about HRV, about heart rate, we're going to be like, hold up, Mo, let me go figure this out. Like, we're not going to, because that's not how we think. So one, we have to educate that lane. The other then becomes is why they're doing these things, right? Why and how are they interpreting it, and what do they want the result to be? Because you also can't live just on like all these metrics, right? Because they're going to change from time to time. I made a video yesterday about the InBody. You guys know the InBody composition scale, right? How many gyms have you gotten in there and people have no idea what it is, right? They walk by it, they step on it with their shoes. And then I put it out when I speak at a conference and everyone's like, oh my God, my gym has it. I never knew what this was, right? So it's like, why do you have this technology and what are you trying to get for it? That's where places like ours are trying to integrate that, right? And then integrate it all together to give you a big picture. And then the next step is integrate it for you, because those numbers are going to matter differently to you, Mo, than to Matthew. And then how do you integrate that? That's where fitness facilities, I think, are missing the boat, to be honest. Think of the heart rate monitor, right? Orange theory, you want to get to orange. But if you're in shape, good luck trying to get me to orange. Or I'm going to get to orange and come back down. So like trying to get me to orange doesn't make any sense. Versus we teach our trainers, hey, they're in red because they're out of shape or this exercise isn't getting them. Teach them that the next step is this. Teach them that this, so that they're not caught up now where they have to hit this metric. Because as a society, we can get pretty anal retentive about like hitting this metric. And I have those guys. I've had people monitoring their glucose because they're wealthy, right? Where they bought the glucose monitor, I'm forgetting the name right now, the trackable that the diabetics use, before it even came out for them. I'm like, how'd you get this? I'm like, well, I have connections, I have this. And now I'm like, what do you want to do for it? Nothing. I just thought it was going to help my health. So kind of putting perspective in that is what I would say.
Well, look, we're up on time, and as always, there's lots more we could ask, and maybe for a part two, as Mo and I say quite regularly on the podcast. But one of the things we normally do is we just wrap up with a takeaway. But I probably on this one, I wanted you've certainly got a unique perspective on two worlds: the medical world and this world of longevity and fitness as well. And I was going to ask you, there's also a lot of noise and a lot of change. You gave the example of RFK and some of the statements that are being made out there in terms of peptides. But if there's one thing that you think is worth keeping an eye on, certainly in the next 12 to 24 months of what I would class as a very rapidly changing category, what would that one thing be, would you say, Nestor?
Yeah, I think peptides is still a big one, obviously, with reticulocyte. And so we've been using it, it's been out, but how that the more studies that are going to come out, how this third GLP is going to kind of shake out with Lilly, and I'm sure lawsuits and things are going to go. So we have to keep track of that. The other thing that we didn't touch base, but I think is brain health and the technology that's coming around brain health and our thought of how do we keep our brain, active for us. That's, to me, that's the next intrigue of how do I get brain mapping included? How do I bring it to the masses? How do then I show that all these things we're doing are ultimately affecting the brain that kind of leads the ship for everything else?
Yeah. Mo, any takeaways for this week?
No, I think my key takeaway here is that consumers are moving ahead of healthcare, and they are also potentially moving ahead of fitness. So not only are they coming into health organizations, but they're also moving into gyms and practitioners with more data than what we're typically used to. So how do we get ahead of it? How do we serve them better? I think, the work with what you're doing at Carbon World Health is exactly how fitness brands should be evolving towards. And I think this transition is going to happen a lot quicker than what we're expecting. Matthew, any key takeaways from you?
An interesting conversation. It's a topic that we have spoke about a number of times, but I think Nestor brings a unique perspective. And I think one of the things that I like, which we started to see, we did an event a couple of weeks ago in Fort Lauderdale with a small group of people, and this was actually discussed there for the first time I've heard it. And so your comments about brain health, I think that's definitely an interesting space to watch. There are some cool things. A few years ago, I went to a clinic quite locally, and he did this brain mapping, and they work with a lot of surfers and football players that have had injuries and basically get their brain to work again. Because in most cases, when you talk to anyone, the first part to any health journey or diet or whatever, it starts in the head. So it kind of makes logical sense that we're not that the most important driver to any of these results is what goes on in between your ears, and yet there's nothing that really focuses on that. So I think that's a really interesting one, and certainly one I'd love to talk about more. So that's it this week, Mo. Do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's been a great episode. I've been chatting with Nestor for a few months now, maybe longer than that. Really excited to see what he's built. And he's been doing this thing for many, many years. And I think a lot of the industry is now just catching up. So if you want to see the future of where fitness is going, and if you're local to the area, if you want to reach out to him, I highly encourage you to look at Carbon World Health. And I want to thank you for joining us. And if people want to learn more about you or the company, what are the best places to find you?
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for having me. Obviously, they can go to our website at carbonworldhealth.com or our Instagram. I recently, out of our PR group, they put me on Instagram. So it's at Dr. Nestor Rodriguez _ where I post a lot of these videos. And I do challenge both colleagues, but also just the consumer and how to think differently, how to implement all these things. And don't think of this separate silos anymore. Integrate them together. So if anyone needs, I'm all about sharing, helping businesses grow. I mean, we've been doing it, like you said, for years. So reach out to me and I'm willing to help however I can, because I want to grow the industry. I think we have to work together to change this narrative.
Well, that's it. Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did get anything whatsoever, please leave us a few comments either on YouTube or on our social media pages. We'd love to hear what you think about it. And also, please share it with one or two people so we can get great guests on the future podcast. So thank you very much for listening.